guess what just changed? COVID showed that a lot of us can work from home. Our society's changing and changing quickly, and COVID accelerated that. But guess what happened? Our master planning of our communities has not made the adjustment to the societal change. The decision making, where does that come from that we need more capacity in our roadway system? That's the sustainable question to me.
Welcome to the Level Design Podcast, a podcast for architects and engineers who want to thrive in this industry by creating more freedom, fulfillment, and financial security. Join us in uncovering how to restore value and honor to the unique people who choose to be designers and caretakers of our built world, and why it's essential to the future of our society, our industry, and our planet.
We talk about this a lot, right? I think on the podcast is, there's an estimated, debatable, depending on your research, but somewhere I bet you it's close. 50% of the carbon released to the atmosphere is because humans are building something.
Yeah.
Humans are building some convenience, roadways, whatever, right? We're building stuff. And so we're building stuff for better human convenience is contributing to half or more of the carbon released to the atmosphere. So that's what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Right. But what is sustainable materials or green infrastructure? What comes to mind?
Yeah. Well, I think of the entire process, and it's a lengthy, intricate process of getting materials from one part of the world to the next, transforming those materials using energy, then transporting them again, then putting them in place, and then monitoring them, and then having that fall apart and rebuilding or maintaining, so I think of all the materials we're using. I think of the fuel and energy we're using to move that process forward and how inefficient it probably is compared to how it could be, just given like the scale of everything and the amount of just government. I don't really trust government to be very efficient with money is kind of what I immediately think of.
Oh, that's interesting. There's a trust issue?
Yeah. I mean, it feels a little bloated.
Does it? Yeah, that's I guess that's where we all say it's the easy thing to blame government, to say you aren't doing this right.
Right.
All right, let's test that theory for a second. So, all right, let's say you're an extremely well-off person and you have a 1 mile driveway.
Mm-hmm.
And you build this 1 mile driveway and you're like, I got 2 lanes, my driveway's asphalt. That asphalt basically deteriorates from the day you build it. It kind of goes 20 years anticipated. Mm-hmm. Okay, so there you are. You own that guy, right? In 20 years, you got to do what to it?
Tear it up.
You got to tear it
over it.
You got to maintain it. Right? Government does that for all those roads we all share. So how much do you think you can maintain that for?
Money
annually
wise, or
how much do you need to set aside?
Right.
To take care of it.
Yeah, if that's my mile road, I'm thinking like, 1,000 a year.
A lot of road, by the way. A mile of road is a lot, right?
That's true. So maybe like 2,000 to 3,000 a year, 5,000 a year.
So government, for the most part, for a rural stretch of road like that, you're not in the city, maintains that for about $500 a year.
Okay.
Not too wasteful, is it?
No, that's great.
So government's doing a pretty good job.
Well, I love that. I love to hear that. I think that my feeling, because I'm just going based off little pieces I hear.
Sure.
Here and there.
Kind of fun to think about though, right?
Yeah. It feels though like the government, it's their job to ultimately to allocate money. So there's all these different problems we have and things that we're working towards. And, you look at the grade of our infrastructure and it's not good. So that's why I'm kind of like, well, they must be dropping the ball.
Uh-huh.
But clearly,
yeah, I would argue the government and its government's teams and its employees and its decision makers are very much representative of our demographic. One of the things about government, I think, there's those surveys that 75, 80% of government employees and staffs and teams, actually what motivates them is community. When they put down what motivates them most as a human, they say community. So I think we got the right place, the right people in the right job, if that's what's really happening, right? So
Yeah,
they care, they work hard, they have structures that prevent them from doing a lot of things. I think our government structures are the problem, not the people.
for sure.
And that is actually a result, in my mind. I don't want to get too deep in this. The structures that government's created is because us as taxpayers say exactly what you said. They don't know what they're doing. They're wasting money. And so this perception from the taxpayer is government's not doing things well. So they build these very rigid structures to explain to the taxpayer what they're doing. Well, they're awfully restrictive. So the structures are reactionary to the taxpayer saying, I don't think you guys are doing your job. So they got to spend a lot of time documenting and categorizing. Anyway, that's what's happening. That aside, though, let's talk about green infrastructure or sustainable things, sustainable materials, these buzzwords going around. I would say that there's a larger conversation about, let's say a water system. This is fascinating to me. Most of the capacity of the water systems are designed for what?
I have no clue.
So a lot of people say, well, it's designed for halftime everybody flushing their toilet in America at the same time, right? Okay, sure, that's pretty big. Everybody's doing it at the same time. But that water system's actually, that's not its biggest issue. That's not why it's as big as it is. It's sized, the water systems in the streets in your neighborhoods, primarily the size and that investment in bigger pipes and things is due to fire. All of our systems in our neighborhoods, the biggest peak demand that we design our systems for is for fighting a fire.
Really?
Yeah. So all of our systems and our fire departments and our thinking is for the water system to support the fire truck showing up and putting out a fire. Mm-hmm. Okay. So that pressure and quantity to fight a fire is available.
Makes sense.
To fight that fire. That's the biggest flow. Okay, well, wait a minute. The building code recently for new construction is leaning and actually requires each home to have a fire suppression system.
Wow.
So it puts itself out or maintains the fire so it doesn't get out of too crazy. So we're asking, or we're telling our homeowners, our new homeowners, you have to pay for that individual fire system. But we are not allowing our water main infrastructure to be smaller. Is that a sustainable decision?
Just so I understand, so is this kind of a nationwide thing that's evolved over the years? Now it's rolling out?
Yeah, it's new. It's recent.
And then it makes sense, especially given the scare that you recently had. I mean, fire can very quickly destroy insane amounts of acreage and homes and property. And what you're saying is that the size, so now we're saying the pipes and the system and all the materials that go into that need to, at a minimum, be able to support putting out fires. So you're saying that we're not shrinking when it comes to materials.
It's a question.
We're growing.
Is that actually green? Is that actually green or renewable when we're still building big water mains, but we have this new rule? Can we make the main smaller? So we have to work this out.
That's fascinating, because the first questions that come to mind are, number one, is there a way to get the same result, putting out like fire protection results with smaller or more efficient materials? The other thing is, if you fast forward and you take X amount of fires destroying X percentage of materials and land, having to rebuild, what's the net, Right.
Now you start to
That's
get
hard.
to the competing interests and the complexities of green infrastructure, this thing
Mhm.
that it's easy.
Mhm.
It's not.
Looking for a new opportunity? Interested in being part of an expanding network of independent engineers and architects who are thinking differently? Level Design Partners is on a mission to create prosperity for design professionals, the industry, and the world using innovative business systems and a culture of collaboration. We believe that traditional education and firm structures want you to be a cog in their machine, depriving you of key skills needed to thrive, thus commoditizing an entire industry in the process. Gain access to skills, tools, and systems by partnering with Level Design Partners. Learn more at leveldesignpartners.com.
Let's move on to transportation.
Okay.
All right. So your example of, let's say, $2,700, somewhere in there per lane mile, that's what it costs to maintain. So one would say, well, let's focus on a better concrete that is, a greener material.
Right.
Fantastic. But I got a bigger question for you. Are we sure we need to build that lane mile to begin with?
Mhm.
Because guess what just changed? COVID showed that a lot of us can work from home.
Mm.
We're not just a factory manufacturing society anymore. We don't necessarily have to go from our house to the manufacturing facility, and that's our job.
Right.
Our society's changing and changing quickly, and COVID accelerated that. But guess what happened? Our master planning of our communities has not made the adjustment to the societal change. Now, think about lane miles or us building roads. Where does that come from? The decision making, where does that come from that we need more capacity in our roadway system? That's the sustainable question to me.
I love that. Talk about getting to the root of the decision.
Yeah, let me give you the complexity here. So you and all of us, we get encouraged from our communities to answer the census. You want to be counted. It's really important to be counted. Why is it important? Who the hell cares? We all move every 4 years. What's all this care about? Well, that equates to that community getting data that show they're growing or they're not growing. And so they need that data and they want to show that they're growing, because if they're growing, it plays into a overall planning document of the future.
I see.
And it secures their portion of federal and state tax dollars for transportation and other things. Well, let's stay with infrastructure. So we have let's say we have a bunch of communities in a metropolitan area that are growing, and they're starting to grow together, right? Each community or each city has their own regional planning, their own master plan of their community. What is that master plan about? What is that overall zoning map, that planning of that community? What is that about? Why do it at all?
Well, first thing that comes to mind is safety.
Safety.
Having the right infrastructure for the number of people, the quantity of people.
Exactly.
Growth.
When it's built out or when it's done, you have the right size of water mains, sewer mains, drainages, and transportation systems so that you're a successful community financially. And it's going to, hopefully it matches what your community wants it to be when it's done.
Right.
Well, cool. So our cities actually are very siloed. You might have one city say, hey, we've got all these communities says they want a rec center, they want better roads, they want trail systems, they want, all these things. So the community is asking their government for more and more and more. And the elected officials go, well, how are we going to fund this? Property tax, but that's not going to cover the asks that our taxpayers are saying. So they say, I'm in City B. City A's got a better rec center. When are we going to get that?
Oof. Yeah.
When are we going to get a better community pool? Because my neighboring city has a better one. So it's competitive.
Mm-hmm.
And the way they compete is by rezoning areas left in their city for commercial, industrial, retail sales tax generation.
Right.
So they can pay for all their communities have. So they can say, oh, we got a spot over here. We can make that industrial and retail. Let's put it over there. That's the only spot we got left. City B is doing the same thing. Guess what they're doing? They're competing for sales tax dollars.
I see.
Now imagine these two areas commuting to those areas for work or for recreation or to buy things. They're commuting from their homes to there. That master plan is actually the water systems, the engineers and architects go, okay, that's the master plan. Let's design all the roads and water mains and transportation for all this commuting to these locations. Let's figure out how big that road needs to be.
Right.
Okay. Well, what if I'm in City A and I'm like, I like that shopping center over at City B better. So I got to build a better road over there.
Starting to merge.
Yeah, and we have national standards in transportation engineering that says, I don't know, 3.2, an average home has 3.2 trips per day. It's standardized. It's like in a book.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we got to build our transportation systems for that. Guess what doesn't happen very well?
Change.
Those two cities, or multiple cities, are not forced to put those areas close to each other so that the transportation systems are not so distributed throughout the landscape. So if they were consolidated, we can start building transit systems.
Right.
For those regions of those two cities who cooperate and say, well, let's put this together. Let's plan our transportations and transit systems so that we're efficiently getting people there and we're not impacting the planet so much.
Right.
This is the green that's not going well.
Yeah.
Because they're competitive, right? Who oversees this activity is an entities that do this work. And my inquiry is, because I've done some of this, it's not going well. They're not cooperating well. They're competitive. And they're called Metropolitan Planning Districts, or MPOs. And the feds have said, if you want federal dollars, you have to create a collaborative or an MPO. So you guys plan your whole regions to avoid this or get better at this. And it's not going as well as I think it could. So we focus on, hey, that concrete material, we can make it less impactful. And I go, I love it. But can we talk about whether our MPOs are playing well?
Bigger lever.
I mean, that's the problem. Do we even recognize that our master plans are based on pre-COVID? Not everybody's driving anymore.
Mm-hmm.
The business in America, a lot of them had said, this is actually working fine. You can work remote. You know how many trips that reduced? Should we still be building that payment that we planned on building from that document 20 years ago? Probably not.
Wow.
And our MPOs, and if you go to these things, and I invite everybody to go to it, it's interesting. They're mainly made up of staff that are in traffic engineering. Is that the right person? Or should you be getting mayors in there going, I'm willing to cooperate with the other mayor?
Right.
Not traffic engineers saying, that's the master plan I was giving, I'm defending it.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So
That's my inquiry of.
yeah, that's a big one, Scott, because I didn't know it went that. I've never thought about it from that perspective. I didn't know that. And how do you,
Most of us don't.
right? So silly question, but I mean, how do you solve that? I mean, like, how do you get, who's going to actually make some sort of change so that there's a collaborative shift instead of competitive? I don't even.
I think when people, yeah, I'm not the only one that recognizes this, by the way, but people in it are very frustrated with this situation and would like to get we, the people, more interested.
Yeah.
So I actually think the answer is we, the people, need to get more involved in our local government and go, hey, are we in an MPO? Curious, can the planning director give us an update on the status of the MPO, and are we coordinating with other communities, or is there some upset? Can I be involved in
Makes sense.
Resolving upset? So I just blame it on we, the people. We got to get more involved in our local decision making. So
that seems to pretty much be the bottom line of a lot of the issues regarding infrastructure and planning that we have. And so, yeah,
our communities would, I don't know. My experience with it was, our government staffs and teams are very frustrated with lack of participation. They're like, gosh, if we could get the community to actually have some more feedback and involvement. These meetings are set up, they occur, and there's like 4 people in the room.
Yeah, it's depressing. There seems to be like too much independence. Independence and freedom is what this country is like built upon. It's in the DNA, but it's almost gone to a level of there's just no sense of community, whether it's people moving all the time, just being disconnected from their local community even.
I think there's an assumption, you tell me, but I think there's an assumption that it's not rewarding, or it's not interesting, or it's not fun. I would say, how many people sit in front of their TV every day and try to get entertained? Well, I got news for a lot of people. It's a lot more fun to get involved in your community and be a part of it. It's actually a hell of a lot more fun than that TV set.
For sure.
So, that's
a lot healthier too.
Probably a lot more healthier, but it's not boring. It's very fun and it's very rewarding to get involved. So
anyway, I love that. Empowering.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So much so.
So quick question, Scott, regarding all this. If you're an engineer, architect, designer, what does this mean? Is there anything you can do to, other than obviously do what we just said, like being a part of local, but what about when you're working, on a project? Is there something that we should know?
I would say that our community staffs are engineering, both from a consulting standpoint or a government standpoint. We're aware. We're not unaware.
Just kind of out of your hands.
Well, I mean, if a master plan document of the city plans completed and there wasn't a lot of participations or questions asked about it, it is the legal document we have to follow as a staff.
Right. Yeah, you're locked in.
Not a lot we can do about it. But our communities and our transportation systems and our social day-to-day is changing very quick. And I am inquiring that our master plans and our thought processes, our parent documents, are not keeping up.
Yeah.
For that to keep up, we, the people, need to stand up and get involved and ask for it to keep up. I don't think we need that extra lane of pavement based on COVID.
Yeah.
And if we don't need it, why are we building it? Even if the concrete's a better concrete, I don't know. It costs $700 to maintain that bad boy every year per mile. That'd be nice as a taxpayer.
That's a great point. Maintenance is insurmountably more sustainable and affordable than building. So,
yeah.
Well, I'm gonna have to sit with all that, let it marinate.
Yeah.
See how I can kind of integrate into my new local area, which is kind of a just a perfect example of a place that's exploded over the past 5-10 years, Austin. And it seems to be, there it had some stressful years there for a while, but it seems to be thriving in a lot of ways. It has plenty of issues, but to handle this much
It has a
growth.
lot of issues. How do you feel about I-35?
Well, here's the thing though. I haven't felt it as much because I'm working from home. I don't ever get stuck in traffic.
Well, guess what? It's not good.
Yeah, so it's never been good though. Yeah, I mean, I-35 is always a nightmare. That's like anywhere though. You're gonna have the main highway that's just a joke come traffic time. But other than that, I feel like, it still feels clean overall. It feels clean. I feel like the water systems are pretty good. The grid, I feel like it's handling itself.
Well, that's a good point. We're not talking about a broken infrastructure. We're just talking about that, and that's why we're having the podcast. It's like, bring attention to it. It's poor. We don't want to do the worst. It's a great infrastructure. So the podcast is a lot about, hey, there's things for us to do to keep it that way.
Yeah. Well, let's knock out a little bit of history before we wrap up.
Okay. Yeah.
But I'm not going to lie to you, Scott. This is just a boring time period.
Not for them. Not for them.
True.
But yes,
true.
From, how much was documented and not terribly exciting.
Yeah.
But, brick is starting to become a thing, and better roads between communities. But I think what I noticed about this area is you're starting to see business get developed. So we're getting out. There's enough people and enough going on. There's starting to be this thing called free business right around here. It's no longer individuals in a cabin just trying to survive the environments and the threats. It's actually starting to get into people are building businesses now.
Interesting. Yeah.
And those businesses need roadways. I've got a tobacco that I'd like to get it up to Philadelphia. It's starting to really take hold here. And the reaction of infrastructure, or I need a roadway, or I need a bigger boat to go down the river, is that this is where infrastructure is starting to serve business and commerce. So those early relationships, American freedom of business, needing infrastructure, is starting to develop. Those relationships are starting to develop here.
That's super interesting point, because, you're kind of just in survival mode, silo mode, surviving the elements. And then we've talked in previous episodes, we're really starting to see like areas coming together, communities with a little bit of early infrastructure, roadways, waterways, a little bit of transportation. And now it's like, okay, commerce. Like, we're not just surviving and taking care of our own, but we're selling something, we're trading something. A lot more of that is probably starting to happen.
That freedom of business is emerging here in the 1720s. And, there's headache, it's around the corner, right? The taxation, as these businesses are starting to thrive, like they're starting to get taxed from the homeland, right? But that's what's happening. Roadways are needed. Sharing of goods, commerce is happening. Probably the upset over bad roads is everywhere. If that road was to Philly was better, I could make a lot more money.
Right.
So now they're getting into governance of shared costs. How do we fund joint infrastructure, and can we collaborate and fund those things together? So this starts to become the time when the purpose of government is starting to become a thing. It's like, how do we create governance for community basic services so that my business or my life can be better? And that's right now. It's an interesting beginning. And this is 1720s is really when it starts to, the thinking, the foundational thinking starts emerging here.
That makes a lot of sense too, because in the next few decades, things really start to pick up.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that business and money and just sharing of resources really starts to scale things up in a lot of ways. So makes a lot of sense.
I don't want to ignore what's actually happening here too in both South America and North America. It is happening on the backs of slavery.
Right.
Slave trade is getting very large right here. And these roads and these things are getting built by slaves. So I don't want to ignore that.
Yeah.
So the next 200 years is really on the backs of suffrage is what's happening here. So
yeah,
a lot of kind of ugly stuff's happening here at this time too. It's not all great.
Yeah, not a clear conscience in the history of the US, that's for sure.
Right. And this is when it's happening. This is when those things are starting to get entrenched also. It's kind of, in one way, it's, this wonderful for the Europeans, these new opportunities, but it becomes very ugly for others, horrific, really. So, but yeah, interesting time, important time. Roadways are beginning to, basically widening paths and gravel roads and things like that. How many miles of gravel roads are still in this country?
Good question.
A fascinating number.
Yeah.
We're not completely out of this era. So the gravel roads of the 1720s, how many do we still have?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's been a while since I've been on a gravel road.
1.4 million miles.
Oh, wow.
Not a small number.
Yeah.
Are still in that same technology as the 1720s.
That's funny.
So,
yeah, well, I mean, if there's only a handful of cars per day, per week, there's no sense in pouring all that money into it.
Yeah, generally speaking, we traffic engineers and county engineers and have kind of are like, okay, once we get over 200 vehicles a day, the gravel roads start to actually be hard to maintain. So you got to do some kind of surface treatment or something, and that kind of gets you to, let's say, 1,000, 1,500, 2,000 vehicles a day when you treat the surface with oil or chlorides. So, but then after that, you better pave it.
Right.
It's interesting.
Wow.
How much does a single vehicle? You might have to double check on this because my memory is horrible. You know that. So how many tons of material, how many pounds of material are moved by one vehicle going down a road? That tire, that vehicle moves how much material per mile?
How many pounds of material are moved per mile?
Driven by a car.
Yeah.
So if a grader goes by and places all the material, gets the road nice and neat, no washboards, no ruts, and then cars start driving over it, that car moves material under the tires. How much does it move?
Yeah, this is giving me some math. 60,000 pounds per mile equals tire weight times revolutions per mile. That can't be right. It's more than that.
It's almost a ton.
Oh.
Per mile. A car tire will almost move a ton of material per mile. It's wild.
So you're saying like break this down a little bit more. You're saying like the weight of the car transferred to that tire to that road.
No, I'm just saying that tire will disrupt sand and gravel and move it from its original final position. It's regraded position, its perfect position, right? That a tire will move it out of its perfect position. That sand and gravel will move it out of that position. To the tune of a couple thousand pounds per mile.
So it's moving that gravel or whatever it is.
It's moving that gravel. And so we got to keep moving it back.
Right. Okay.
That's such an interesting number.
Yeah. Yeah, you scale that, right, across the whole country and every dollar that it takes to move it back over and over. I mean,
yeah,
that's crazy.
That's why you get washboards. But, all right.
Cool. Well, that was the 1720s. So next episode, we'll be doing the 1730s. Thank you, Scott.
You bet. And things wake up. Things start really going fast in the next few decades. Yeah.
Yeah. Buckle up.
Thanks for listening. If you found value in this episode, support us by sharing it with someone or leaving a review. In upcoming episodes, we'll discuss the realities of the industry today and what the future may look like. It's our belief that positive changes for architects and engineers is not the obligation of the industry, but rather a choice you make to reimagine how we work together. We invite you to join us in creating a world in which design professionals thrive. Learn about our mission and get involved by following us wherever you listen to podcasts and subscribing to our newsletter at leveldesignpartners.com.